Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are joining us from around the world, and welcome to another one of Kneat's informational webinars. Thank you so much for joining us. Just a few housekeeping notes before we really begin here. As always, if you've joined one of our webinars before, you are in listen-only mode. So we recommend using earphones or a headset to better listen to the webinar as we go through it. You will not have access to your video or your microphone, so you don't have to worry about being on camera or accidentally unmuting. But we do still want you to engage, to participate, and to submit any questions that you have throughout the webinar. Submit them to the questions module on your control panel. Should be just like the one that you see on my screen here. You can submit those questions at any time throughout the webinar, and we'll have time at the end to answer some of them with our subject matter expert today. As always, we welcome your feedback. There'll be a short survey at the end of the webinar that we kindly ask that you take just a couple minutes to fill out. We also always love to hear more of your feedback, handle any questions that you have, or provide an in-depth one-on-one demo of our Kneat Solutions platform, Kneat GX. So if you need any more information about that or want to share any feedback with us, you can always contact us at info@kneat.com, info@kneat.com. The slides and the recording of today's webinar will be available a few days after the webinar ends, and those will be sent out to you in an email. If you don't get them and you want to inquire, you can also reach out to us on there, or look for the video on demand on our website under our webinars page. So now just a brief slide on the copyright and disclaimer statement for Kneat. And then I'll welcome you all to our Accelerate Production through Digital C&Q. Today's presentation is brought to you by Kneat's own Amy Wilhite. And just a little agenda to go through what we'll talk about today. We'll go through the introductions, as I'm doing now, talk a little bit about document digitization and a few points within there: streamline your product lifecycle management, standardization, and how to implement, document and data accessibility, utilize your existing lifecycle management process, and useful information hidden inside documents. All of that will be presented by our Senior Process Engineer, Amy Wilhite. Then I will come back to talk a little bit more about Kneat as a company and Kneat GX as a platform to hopefully wrap in everything that Amy has talked about. And then we'll end by getting to your questions and answers. So again, feel free to submit any of those questions to questions module in GoToWebinar. Anytime that you have them come up, submit them, and we'll get to them at the end. So that's enough for me from right now. We'll want to get into the meat and potatoes of the webinar today. And here to talk about accelerating your production through digital C&Q is, like I mentioned, Kneat's own Senior Process Engineer, Amy Wilhite. Amy, thank you so much for joining us today.
Absolutely, happy to be here.
Take it away.
All right, awesome. Well, thanks everyone for dropping in, coming into the webinar so we can talk about digitalization and why this is kind of the way of the future here. So I know the concept of digitalization could be a little daunting, but hopefully some of the things that I share today will ease your minds if you have any reservations about that kind of thing, because it's a lot easier than it seems like it might be. And there's so many benefits that make it well worth the time to get this kind of thing implemented. So there are a few different levels of digitalization, and most companies right now that are practicing a C&Q process or any validation process for that matter are utilizing at least what we refer to as a hybrid approach. So you've got some things on paper and some things that are digital. For example, you might no longer have to go and print out an SOP every time you need to look at it. You probably have a document repository somewhere that has things like that you can easily see from your computer or your tablet if you're operating in a manufacturing facility and you're mobile or things like that. But then when you're actually going to execute documentation like testing protocols, commissioning, qualification, validation protocols, things like that, you might not have an electronic platform that's got that kind of thing readily available. So that might have to be something that's developed and then printed out on paper so that you can apply your traditional wet signatures and your time and date sign-offs and things like that. So that would be like a hybrid approach of where you've got some things digitally, but some things on paper as well. So hopefully we are moving to a state of time where we can start moving towards fully digital solutions, where all of the paper is replaced by some kind of digital solution. So you don't have to print things out anymore, wasting all that paper and resources. So you can do everything kind of online with still maintaining your compliance with all of the regulatory agencies regarding things like signatures and real-time execution and things like that. So a lot of folks now are moving towards a fully digital process by taking some baby steps, such as paper to glass, where you've got all your stuff on paper and you're slowly kind of scanning it all in. You maybe executed it on paper, but now you can scan it and keep it online on your document repository system, and you don't have to store it, in huge facilities that are made just for, paper storage and things like that. You don't have to worry about all of the storage that you need at your desk and things like that to keep documentation that's already been completed, because you're scanning it in and you're digitizing it after the fact. So one step above that would be the paper to digital, where maybe you created it on paper first, but then you're able to scan it into a system and interact with that document there in the system. So these are kind of the different levels of digitalization, and moving towards this fully digital approach is the ideal scenario. So we'll take a look at the next slide. So one of the ways that we want to streamline the product lifecycle management, whether that's however you need to validate your product. So if you are doing commissioning, qualification, validation efforts during the lifecycle management of your product development, then you need to really streamline those things to make it efficient, to make it competitive. Everyone knows how difficult it is to get things to market. So this is something that will definitely speed up that if you have it on paper and you're able to save all this time and labor with manual paper efforts that are slower. So one of the ways that you can start to streamline this by using a digital solution is that your documents can be structured in the actual order of operational sequence. So rather than searching through an entire repository of your documentation and trying to figure out which documents you need for what type of operation or process or activity, you could have all of them ordered in the way that you would execute them. So if you start with a validation plan, and that drives you to generate your specification documents, and then that should drive you towards populating your testing requirements, what you're going to need based on those requirements, and then assessing the risks that are involved. So maybe you need a risk assessment, things like that. And then you can actually design the protocols and execute those. And then you can wrap everything up into a summary at the end in a validation report, for example. Then we can sequence that to give you all of the documents that you need in the order of operations that they flow, so that it's something that's pretty easy and automated for the end user. They just get everything they need in the order they need to do it. And this kind of automation helps to remove those manual processes, which reduces the time and labor involved to actually create those documents and those deliverables. So if you have everything digitally, you're able to do things like configure some automatic numbering schemes. So sometimes you have to refer back to an SOP to see how to number a document. Sometimes you even have to send a request to like your quality team to get them to give you the next appropriate sequential number to number your document, things like that. So those things can actually be automated in a digital system so that it automatically knows what number to give that document, and you don't have to worry about any of that that's usually associated with the manual process of numbering things. And then all of those automatically numbered documents can get grouped into a pack, such as what we would call like an electronic binder. So all the things that you would normally see in a paper binder that you have to, pick up and carry from place to place to execute, and then drop off and let it rotate around on people's desks. All of that can kind of be digitized. So all those documents are still together, but they're in electronic binder instead. So you can still have everything in one place, easy to reference, but you've eliminated the physical paper version of that. And then all of the documentation that you're used to having to fill out for all of those different documents in that binder, for example, needing to fill in your equipment number or name with maybe a copy paste or replace all that you're typically used to doing, or even if you're doing it solely on paper, it's something that you're manually writing in into about a dozen places. We can actually automate that with digital solutions as well, so that anything that is supposed to be the same from document to document, like the scope of the equipment that's in the realm of being validated or commissioned or qualified, maybe the room number that the equipment is in, anything like that, we can actually have that data automatically flow and get pushed to all of the relevant documents instantly, so you don't have to copy and paste throughout all of them. And then that's hard coded, so it's assured that it's always going to match, and you don't have to worry about a user error from one document to the next. And then since all of those documents are pushed out together, you can actually do your requirements tracing through those. So if you've got specific requirements in maybe a URS or maybe a functional spec or a design spec that have to be tested in a certain way using a certain test, you can actually link that directly to the test case, so that when you run a requirements traceability matrix to make sure that all of your requirements have been tested appropriately, it'll automatically link them all to the correct spec, so that you can see every specification that you've listed and where it was satisfied with the required testing. So all of these things will definitely help to speed up the time to market. Some of the stats here are things we've taken in our own case studies. So we've seen things with our large companies that are in the C&Q realm, such as 88% reduction in approval workflow durations, because not having to carry a giant paper binder from desk to desk will helpfully reduce those time durations of waiting for people to sign. Everything's done electronically. 60% reduction in process cycle time, so having everything digitalized definitely helps to reduce the actual things that you need to do to get the document ready and executable and reviewed and then post-approved. So the entire process cycle of qualifying a piece of equipment or computer system, or even a process or a method that you're using to test can be reduced greatly just by having it digital. And then 40% reduction in overall process steps. So I mentioned a few of those things that you can skip, like going to quality for your document numbering, waiting for things to print off, trying to compile the actual binder on paper to begin with, and then of course like moving the document physically from desk to desk if you have a large group of approvals that are needed. All those things can just be totally taken out of your process, so we can reduce the actual steps that you need to do in order to fulfill that. We can go to the next slide. So it might seem like a big undertaking to start with implementing a digital solution, but it can be done very easily if there are a few best practices that are utilized by companies and organizations that are interested. So the preferred method is to ensure that you have a top-down process that you can standardize globally and then roll that out to all your sites. So right now that's not easy to do on hybrid approaches or paper approaches, because everyone has their own repository of templates and they have their own specific set of test cases and things like that that they like to use at their site. And sharing that with all the other sites is not historically been a very easy effort, because by the time you've emailed it or something to 12 other subject matter experts and they've all gotten your comments back, that's probably weeks worth of time that you've then utilized to try and get everyone aligned. And then even if you did have that alignment, everyone's still relying on their own file explorer, you know, on their computer to store, you know, the last version of their favorite protocol so they can use that one again. So it's not as easy to standardize without a digital platform in operation. But once you do have that digital platform, it makes this whole thing a lot easier. And there are definitely some ways that you are not able to standardize, you know, site to site. It doesn't have to be all or nothing with everyone operating the exact same way and no one has any autonomy. There are other ways down here I'll share with as the slide progresses with how to kind of maintain those sites, getting to do the things that make sense for that site, but still kind of utilizing a global process. So we've got your globally defined discipline. That's what we kind of refer to as your work process. So that would be something like maybe commissioning qualification, or maybe it's a process validation discipline, or maybe it's a QC test method discipline. So whatever kind of work process you need to design that you want a digital solution for, that's what you would kind of define globally so that your entire organization has a philosophy regarding that particular process and is aligned on the way that that general process should work. And then you've got your set of templates, which will allow everyone to pull from the same content whenever they're drafting and developing their documents, whether it be plans, reports, specifications, risk assessments, protocols, test cases, anything that you might have as a deliverable in your process, even things like change control forms and deviations. You can keep kind of a central repository of the current and best template that you would like everyone to use so that everyone can pull from the same one and keep aligned there. And then those templates would be managed by whoever your global system owner would be for that particular system. So that would allow you to approve templates in the system, but then when you're actually going to use those documents, you can have a different set of approvals for when you've actually pulled that document into your own site. You're maybe drafting it, adding in your specific equipment requirements, and then you're ready to execute that, you know, documentation or that testing or whatever it may be in your own facility. Then you can send it to your own folks there on site for approval using whatever kind of workflow you would have proceduralized for your own particular site. So you can still kind of remain autonomous in your site with operating within the way that your particular facility needs to operate, but you're still kind of utilizing that global content. And so that will help you kind of maintain this alignment and quality. So it gives you a lot better control of the process and the documentation that you use. And just harmonizing throughout all of your different sites will increase your efficiency because you don't need to worry about, you know, 20 different types of the same document and everyone using different information, and maybe there's some gaps with, you know, what information is available at different locations. So increasing that efficiency to make sure everybody's got the same content and it's all instantly available online to everyone all at the same time. So I mentioned the separate site workflows already when we were talking about the template workflows. So if you've got maybe a location it's maybe a more physical manufacturing facility, you might need things like your facilities or your manufacturing suite owners or things like that to sign off on certain documentation. And then other facilities maybe are more lab-based. So maybe they have things that are more like QC lab owner or microbiology or chemistry manager or things like that that are the more appropriate people to sign off on their documents. So that's kind of how you can keep those approval workflows site-specific while still maintaining your global standardized process. Another way to do that is with our test case library. So we have in our digital solutions various means of capturing digital versions of documentation. So one of the handy tricks is that you could have all of the tests that you normally deploy for any particular type of system, whether it be an equipment asset, a computer system, maybe there are test cases that are specific to a drug substance product or a drug product. Maybe there are test cases that are specific to testing methods for QC for various types of analytical processes. So if you have a library of tests that you commonly use, I'll take equipment, for example, you could have those all available to be utilized, and everyone's using the latest and greatest kind of test for that. So for example, if you've got a facility that has purified water, you might need tests that are things like filter integrity tests, valve checks, distribution, worst case scenarios, sanitization checks, and things like that. But then if you just switch from a purified water drop to maybe a water for injection drop, then that could be a whole different suite of test cases that you might need. Because you might need to do the water for injection test to verify the quality of that water. And then if you switch from a water drop to something like a gas process, maybe it's a nitrogen drop instead of a water drop, now you need to do a gas quality test. So you can have an entire suite of test cases that would allow you to just drag and drop whatever tests you need straight into the protocol that you're doing based on whatever the equipment type is. And so that can match whatever your SOPs say. If you've got certain tests that go to certain things based on your SOP, or maybe it's based on guidance from industries, maybe it's based on PDA or ISPE or FDA regulations, all of that can be matched so that you can get the right tests for the right type of system. And then lastly, section group templates work the same way. If you've got something that is specific to your site that you'd like to create as a template, for example, for only your site to use, like maybe you have an equipment scope, or let's say a system boundary that you'd like to add into several different documents, but it's obviously only relevant to that system at your specific site. You can templatize just those little sections as well, so that you can keep utilizing those and pulling those into your documents. And then it's still kind of maintaining your site specific area. So you have different places where you can store global templates, and you've got different places where you can store site specific section templates as well. All right, next slide. So the accessibility portion of this, as I was saying before, with the process that I think a lot of folks are used to, with having to take that paper binder and kind of lugging it around and hoping that everyone's in office and not on vacation or whatever the case may be. The accessibility portion here is really increased with a digital process, because you're able to work with folks remotely, regardless of where they are or who needs to be signing off on that particular document at that time. And then if something were to occur, such as a change, maybe you elected to have someone on the approval panel, but they are unexpectedly out of office, rather than having to pull that document back and change the approval cycle and then reissue it, you could simply reassign that particular approval to someone else who fits that particular user group. So if it's like a manager type role, maybe there are 2 or 3 different types of different manager users who would have been able to sign that role. So if you're, one of them is out of office, you could reassign that to one of the other 3 that are allowed to sign off for that particular role. So having this remote access will definitely help to kind of get the document accessibility and the data accessibility. Another kind of approach is that you will be able to collaborate more effectively with your teams. So like I was saying, how it's kind of hard to align with all of these multiple sites on one particular type of way that you'd like to standardize something. It's hard to do that in today's world without having a shared platform, because you might not have everyone on the same page, you might not have everyone with the same access to the system. things like that. It's going to be a lot easier to operate once you've got this kind of shared platform, because everyone can weigh in and have their opinions. Maybe they've got comments. They could even edit, the same document simultaneously with all the changes tracked and things like that, so that everyone's kind of collaborating on this effort, and they could be on all different parts of the world, collaborating real time together in a digital system. So having this remote access will help to get that operating mode where everyone is able to access it all at the same time. Having everything online also helps you to retrieve everything very quickly. So if you needed to find a document that you needed for example, an audit scenario, an auditor has asked you for a document, you could just query the system easily and it will pull up all the latest documentation related to that particular system. Whereas on paper or hybrid approaches, you might have to search through file repositories if it's something that you scanned. And then unfortunately, if it's not something that you scanned in with that paper to glass approach, you might have to track it down on paper by looking through file cabinets or going to a storage facility and hunting down that information. So having it all retrievable instantly within a digital system will help have the visibility to that content so that you're able to pull it up for any kind of request that you might receive. So the exportable audit trail that is included with a digital platform that's designed for regulatory adherence will help capture everything that your users are doing. Of course, you're going to have your date and timestamps that are associated, all of those Alcoa principles, so that everything is captured with your good documentation and your compliance to all the regulatory regulations will be included in a digital system, so that everything is able to be shown to an auditor with confidence that it's got the latest information and it's all documented effectively. You have the benefit of real-time data and analytics. So if you have all of your documentation in a digital platform, you could see things that are related to that process in a digital way. So for example, if you wanted to see real-time data on when a document was approved, all you have to do is look for that document, and then there'll be the timestamps there to see when it was approved. And maybe you want to take that one step further and see how long did it take to get approved, because maybe that's a metric that you'd like to report on for your facility to see kind of how long this process takes in the approval workflow. Then you can see those durations in the system as well. Instantly, you can see those real time. And then you could maybe you want to monitor those criteria to make sure that all of the metrics that you're looking to track are being done in the kind of efficient way that you'd like. So if there are things that are taking longer or metrics that you'd like to improve upon, you can use those metrics to evaluate things like your KPIs, your key performance indicators, so that if there are bottlenecks or things like that in your approval cycles, for example, you'd be able to see that in the system immediately, and you could adjust or make whatever modifications you'd like to your process to improve those. An additional, of course, perk is that you don't have to use that paper physical storage space. So you don't have to hire additional document management companies. You don't have to scan everything in. Some of those include, having to buy industrial scanners and then hiring people to scan in all your documentation, or even, hiring additional companies to house your documentation. So this kind of eliminates all of that extra resource that you'd have to spend on just maintaining your paper storage solutions. Because once you've got everything digital, you don't need that paper anymore. Okay, next slide. So with our digital approach, you will be able to utilize whatever your existing lifecycle management process already is. So a good digital platform is going to let you operate your process the way that you want, while also maybe employing some efficiencies and optimizations just by having an automated process available now, a digital process and automated features that allow for things to be streamlined or linked easier, things like that. But it would still run your process the way you want. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel to adopt a digital platform. You can still have your process operate the exact same way that you always have, as far as what documents you think are needed, or the process flow of how your systems get commissioned and qualified and validated and things like that. The general process is still there. However you specified in your SOPs, it can be matched in the electronic digital platform. So the transition of taking your kind of paper process and digitalizing it made easy with the ability to just import all of the content that you've already got. So we can do things like take your paper templates, import them into the digital platform, and then you have everything that was on paper the exact same way. The paragraphs are there, all of the content that you wanted to be there, the headers, the cover pages, everything that you wanted in your original stuff. It still looks the exact same, but now it's on a digital screen, and maybe there are some additional features built in, like some of those smart fields that will auto-populate throughout your documents for you, and things like that. So it looks the same as your original process, but it's just smarter and more efficient, and it's digital. You also have the ability to integrate some of your existing systems. The Kneat platform, for example, is API compatible, so any kind of integrations that you might want to build with third-party systems to still be able to utilize some of your other applications that you already use can also be done. So if you have document management systems that store all of your SOPs or your legacy data, for example, you could integrate with that system and have the documentation communicate from Kneat to that platform. Maybe you've got a system that has your CAPA management, and you'd like to reference out to that system. You can also build an integration that will help those two applications communicate with each other. We also have integration examples with things like Jira and Azure, where you have electronic or automated test cases that are happening for computer systems, and you want to kind of import that data in from that system and put it into Kneat for maybe a site validation report that you've done on all of your computer systems or things like that for the year, and then you can import that data in. So even though you're adopting a new digital validation solution for your validation efforts, you can still talk to all those other applications. So you don't need to worry about losing the connections that you've already got with other systems. And then you have, of course, the ability to do everything electronically with your documentation, including authoring documents, executing test documents, and then you have review and approval cycles that are all done electronically. So review cycles, you can add anyone in your user base to review a document. They can provide comments and annotations on the document. You can continue to make changes to the document. It'll capture everything in the version history. And then you can approve your documents electronically as well. Kneat is CFR Part 11 compliant, so any electronic signatures that are applied are attributed back to a specific user based on their unique login credentials. And that can even be tied in to work with your existing authentication methods that you use for general computer access or network access or application access with other things through single sign-on. So Kneat is compatible with any kind of single sign-on requirements that you might have as well. And then you've got most companies with SOPs or things like that that determine who is supposed to sign what type of document. So what role is needed to sign a particular document. For example, maybe you need manufacturing manager to sign off on their facility suite being validated, a piece of asset in there. Maybe you need the equipment owner, so maybe that's someone from engineering to sign off. You probably need someone from quality to sign off on your documents. And then maybe you want someone just selected as the author for your documents. You can design your approval workflows to have any kind of roles that you need, and then you can assign only the correct user to those particular roles. So for example, when you're setting up a user for the first time in the application, you have an account, maybe you verify their training, you're setting them up, they've got the ability to log on now, and then you will add them as a quality signer. Maybe they're in the quality department. So that way, whenever you go to assign a document to someone in quality, their name will appear as an available person who is allowed to sign that particular document. And if someone is not in the quality department and they've not been added to the quality role by your system administrator, then their name will not appear there and they won't be able to sign. So it's a good way to control the right folks signing for the right roles, and that's totally customized to whatever your internal requirements are. And then you can attach and record evidence without ever leaving the app. So you can still capture your evidence the same way that you were before. Maybe that's taking screenshots of a temperature trend in your building management system or something like that. And you would normally have that screenshot, and then you might have to compile it with a bunch of other screenshots in like a Word document, and then assign them all unique numbers and all that kind of stuff. You can kind of do that all seamlessly now in the app. So you could hit the print screen button on your laptop, for example, to take a screenshot of something, and then you can just control paste it straight into your execution document, and it will attach it as a screenshot. And it will give it a special unique number, and it'll always be tied to that particular test step of that test case in that test protocol. It'll always be linked and it'll always be there. So you can kind of do that all in the app now without having to compile objective evidence outside of the app and things like that. All right, go to the next slide. So some of the useful hidden bits of information that are always inside of all documents, but might not be utilized to their best potential, especially on a paper type system or a hybrid approach, are kind of listed here. And I want to just hit on these real quick to kind of let you know some of the things that are already existing in your document templates that we can simply turn into a data point, so that they could be reported on or looked at as a metric, or instantly filtered throughout the rest of your documents. So kind of any piece of text or information that's in your documents already, maybe it's something that's in your paragraphs for your scope, or maybe it's something that's in your final reporting section of your protocols. There are lots of these kind of hidden elements that we can simply automate with the push of a button and just turn it into kind of a smart field so that it can report on these things. So some examples would be in your issues. So those are things like deviations, discrepancies, exceptions. We see lots of different kind of synonymous words for things like these. Maybe it's a non-conformance form, any kind of issue that you might have. Typically, our customers will have a form that they fill out that says what happened, why is it a problem, maybe what are you going to do about that, that kind of thing. So we can take that form and we can pull out certain pieces of it to report on. So maybe you've got things like the root cause. If you turn the root cause into a data point, then we can query your system and find out all of the issues that had that particular root cause in it. So maybe if you're looking for things like trends for hardware errors or things like that, you could pull that information and find out instantly how many hardware errors you had in that particular facility for the last month or the last year, or for all time, or things like that. So any kind of piece of information like that could be very helpful to find these kinds of trends. If you're seeing that you, for example, always have a fault right before a validation activity. So for example, if it's a periodic validation effort, maybe there's a piece of equipment that you have to validate every 2 years, for example, and you're finding a fault trend that that particular type of equipment always has an error before it, like during that validation effort, so that it never quite makes it through to the validation. Maybe you would use that as a predictive maintenance item, and you would up that routine validation to every year instead. Because if you're obviously not able to make it through to 2 years without the system breaking down, maybe you want to do your validation more frequently or something like that. So you can use those kind of hidden elements in your forms to find those trends, and then even predict what kind of maintenance you might want to do based on those trends. The next one is the embedded data sharing. So some of these things are words that are specific to our particular application, but properties, ID tags, and attributes are all just fancy ways of saying making something into a data point. So for example, for the log properties, if I wanted to embed your asset number, for that particular piece of equipment into your documentation, so that it auto-populates throughout your spec and then your protocol and then whatever else, I could add that as a data point. Another data point I might want is the room number where that's located, and then maybe the validation status of that. Maybe that's located in like your validation summary report, and the status is qualified or decommissioned or something like that. It could be a data point that you might want to report on. And then maybe another property is something like who it was that initiated that particular project. So I could take all of those data points and I could actually pull them into a log, and then I could have a report of all the assets, all of their qualification statuses, all the room numbers that those are in, and what operator was performing the validation efforts on those, all in one table in a log. So that's kind of one of the handy scenarios where we can share that data into various parts of the application. ID tags work the same way. We can just assign automatic ID numbers to things that are critical, such as a URS requirement. So if you already are assigning something like a requirement number to a particular requirement, which is the case, you usually have dozens, if not hundreds of requirements in a document, and they each get a unique number. We can just turn that number into a data point. We say this is an ID number, now it's a data point, now I can trace that number through to the testing, maybe where that particular requirement was satisfied, and I can just turn that ID field into a data point. So now instead of it just being a random number that has no value other than when you're reading the document, now it's an actual data point, and that particular requirement can be included in the system as data. And then attributes work similarly to properties. It's ways of assigning particular attributes to your entities. And an entity in our system is referred to as like an equipment or asset ID for this example. So if you've got, maybe it's a freezer, and one of the attributes is whether or not you store product in it. That could be one of your attributes. Like this is a product freezer, or this is a non-product freezer, because maybe it's only storing media or things like that. So you can assign key attributes that will help classify your different kind of entities. And then the last one here, doc metrics. So these are some of the things I kind of hit on already. If you're looking at things like approval phases and cycle times, those are all things that you can pull up in the system to make sure that there's no bottlenecks, or if you're looking for places of improvement, maybe you are interested in making your execution times on protocols more efficient. you can track all those doc metrics to see how long it took to draft things, how long it took once you were in execution mode to finish the execution, how long it took to approve them. So the duration on all those cycles can be some key performance indicators and metrics that customers are interested in looking at to verify that their lifecycle management solution is efficient. And if it's not, then you can look at those metrics and figure out how to improve that. So those are all kind of helpful data points that are kind of hidden that you might not think of when you are looking at your paper documents. But pretty much any element inside your existing content could be turned into a data point, and then that could be utilized throughout the application in various ways. So that's always something we like to point out for our customers to think about, how any of your text in your documents can be considered data. All right. So I think that is the last slide that I have for the digitalization part. Just in general, it's a great way to move forward, digitizing your process, making it more efficient, streamlined. It's not that hard. It takes everything that you've already got in operation and it just turns it into a digital solution. So definitely is the way to go for the future is digitalizing your validation processes.
Thank you so much, Amy. That was really an informative presentation. And so now I'll take it over a bit to talk about a great platform to use for digitizing your validation process, which is Kneat GX. And so I'll talk about Kneat as a company a little bit first. We are a publicly traded company on the Toronto Stock Exchange, and we're held to a high governance standard. We have over 280 employees, with 140 in product development and 50 in professional services. We are the validation platform of choice to 8 of the top 10 life science companies and 3 of the 4 COVID-19 vaccine manufacturers that all digitize their validation process. We have 80 plus customers in North America, Europe, and Asia. We are a global company, both in our employers, but also in our customer base. We have 40,000 plus users in the Kneat software as a service platform, Kneat GX. So we have 150 plus global site deployments, 40 plus certified global partners, and operations, like I said, all over the world. Our headquarters in Ireland, but also operations in France, Germany, Switzerland, Denmark, Canada, and the USA. All of our development for our platform is done in-house. There's no outsourcing, and that is to keep quality and security high. We also carry both of these 2 ISO certifications. And so what is Kneat GX? Kneat GX is a software as a service validation lifecycle management platform. It digitizes your validation from end to end, enabling regulated companies to make validation and auditing easier, faster, and smarter. So it digitizes any work process, and it is one solution for any of those work processes. Method validation, process validation, I'm not going to go through all of these, but it is one platform that does everything, and it is accessible anywhere that you are, as long as you have a smart device and an internet connection. So why do 8 of the world's top 10 life science companies choose Kneat? It is simply that simplicity. One platform that works for any process. It is purpose-built and Part 11, Annex 11 compliant software as a service platform. It eliminates 100% of paper from the validation lifecycle. And eliminating all that paper is proven to reduce cycle times, reduce skilled labor hours, and therefore reduce validation costs. And it's also proven to increase right the first time and speed to market. It is a platform that is easy to use, easy to train, and easy to scale. Like I said, it is everything that you need for your digital validation, all on whatever device you have on hand, a mobile phone, a tablet, a computer. As long as you have access to an internet connection, you have access to your entire database. It is audit ready at any time. You can search easily through all of your validation, all of your signatures, everything to find what you need when you are audited unexpectedly. And it automatically enforces data integrity. We are a very secure platform. You will have access to yours and only your data anytime that you need it through single sign-on, two-factor authentication, all of our data security methods. So moving on to not just numbers that Kneat boasts, but numbers that have been found in independent customer benchmarking studies. So not just numbers that we brag about, but numbers that have been found by Kneat customers. So all of these that I'm about to mention are found in those independent customer benchmarking studies. We have found reduces equipment changeover time by as much as 85%, reductions in validation life cycle time by over 50% when used for commissioning and qualification. Again, all these are when used for commissioning and qualification, Q&C, like we've been talking about. Reducing labor hours and costs by over 50 to 65%, and saving $810,000 US in ERP deployment. So overall, 65% fewer validation labor hours, 46% fewer process steps, and more than 40% efficient than our leading competitor. And again, these are not just numbers that Kneat has made, these are numbers that we have found and been found through customer benchmarking studies. A lot of those case studies can be found on Kneat.com. You can read more in depth about specific partners and specific customers, how they are using Kneat specifically for their industries and their work processes, and how they have found those numbers. So now we have just a few minutes here, a little bit under 10 minutes of our hour remaining. I want to cover any Q&As, any questions and answers that you may have for Amy on her brilliant presentation earlier, or about Kneat in general. Both Amy and I are within the Kneat family, so we can answer any questions you have about C&Q in general, or Kneat as a platform or as a company. So feel free now to open that questions module on your GoToWebinar control panel. Submit any questions that you have. We don't have any questions coming up yet. So Amy, I just wanted to give you a chance. If you have any last minute messages, any tips, anything you want to tell the viewers, now would be a good time while we wait for questions.
Sure. So I know one of the common questions that we get during mapping is how you are able to kind of include the issues management and change management processes within your validation efforts. So as James was saying, we have so many different process types that can be included into Kneat. If you think about anything like that as a sub-process, then it's something that's just easily included as well. So if you've got process validation, for example, and you have a way to record like batch record out of acceptance results, things like that, we can create a sub-process in the system to handle those exceptions. If you've got something like a test method validation and you have anomalous results that you need to report, that's an additional sub-process. If you've got something like an equipment management system, you're doing validation efforts or things like that, and then you modify that equipment afterwards, we can build in a change management process, sub-process into the application. And that could be as little as just one extra document. Maybe it's just a change form. And then we can design a series of actions that occur based off you filling out that change form. So if the response to the change is you need to revalidate the system, then we can design that change form to kick off your validation binder all over again so that you can revalidate the equipment. Or if it, the opposite effect is you don't have to revalidate it, maybe the change will drive you to simply update your validation summary report to just report whatever the modifications were into the system's official file records. So any kind of sub-processes that you already have embedded in the way that you do your work processes can definitely still be added into the way that your system works in a digital platform.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Amy, for those words. We have one question that has come in. I'm not quite sure I know the answer to this, but Amy, I'll try you out. One of our attendees wants to know if Kneat is available in Portuguese language, or a Brazilian Portuguese specifically. I know that any documents uploaded can be in whatever language, but do you know the language capabilities of Kneat GX itself?
Yeah, so that is a question that we've gotten before. Our application is browser based, so we work specifically with Chrome and Edge, and Chrome is happy to support our system with any of their patches or upgrades or things like that. So specifically, if you have Google Chrome, and you have actually changed your web browser, like your entire computer browser settings, to a different language, Kneat will change the language of the application to match. It translates the page as if it's just text from the browser. So it'll translate it the way that it would translate any web page.
Excellent. That is a great answer. Perfect. Thank you for that. That seems to be the only question that has come in, so I can only assume that that means your presentation was thorough and left no room for questions. So really appreciate that. We'll go ahead and wrap it out just a few minutes early here then with everything that we've covered. I want to thank you, Amy, again for joining us today and for that presentation. It was very insightful. I want to thank our attendees and our audience members for joining us and spending the time with us on this busy Wednesday. I want to tell everyone that we have more webinars coming up. We do at least 2 a month. We always have our monthly demo webinar, a live demo with a Kneat product expert to walk you through Kneat GX. So if you want to hear more about Kneat GX, you can look out for one of those demos coming up next month. We just had our October one yesterday, so our November one will be coming up in a couple weeks. You can also reach out to us at info@kneat.com or on kneat.com. There are different resources available to have private one-on-one specialized demonstrations of Kneat GX to get more into your specific needs and work processes. There's also a backlog of all of our informational webinars on kneat.com, where you can go back and see the video recordings of all of our previous webinars. So we definitely invite you to go check those out. Follow us on social media, on X, formerly Twitter, and LinkedIn. Follow our posts and see what webinars are coming up and what we are doing in the validation industry and what Kneat is up to. So again, thank you everyone for spending the time with us today. Thank you, Amy. Thank you so much. We hope to see you again next year for another webinar. And have a great day, everyone.
Absolutely. Thanks, everybody.